My son abandoned me in the woods, revealing a shocking truth. I returned to an unexpected funeral. George stood at the foot of the towering pines, their shadows blanketing him like a dark shroud, the weight of solitude pressing down harder with every breath. He could feel it, the chasm that had opened between him and Tyler. Just days before, they had planned this camping trip, a final attempt to bridge the widening gap carved by grief and time. Now, under the verdant canopy, he felt more alone than ever. He'd always expected to share these woods with his son, to guide him as he had done in years past. Instead, Tyler had turned his back, a reckless decision fueled by frustration and a young man's ambition. As George trudged deeper into the forest, the sting of unresolved conflict rose in him like bile. Why had he let things come to this? How could he face the anguish of losing both his wife and now his son? Panic clawed at him, but anger tripped alongside it. Memories of Tyler as a boy, laughing in the leaves, hunting for worms together, danced through his mind. Now ghosts of what had been. George had sold his soul for a lifetime of duty as a ranger, protecting nature, yet neglecting his own blood. Every whisper of wind carried an accusation, a reminder of what he lacked. Could he ever reclaim what they once had? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening, he mumbled to himself in a desperate attempt to ease the spiraling thoughts. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. The absurdity of his own words struck him, but it felt necessary to ground himself somehow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The repetition of these thoughts was a futile shield against the approaching storm of guilt, but it was all he had. An urgent crack of a branch startled him out of his reverie, sending roiling thoughts crashing back. Tyler's betrayal cut deeper than a trivial anger. In a moment of emotional upheaval, his son had left him alone in these merciless woods. The betrayal was fresh, the pain raw, a wound that throbbed angrily within him. George pushed forward, limbs heavy, overwhelmed by dread of what he might find or lose as he wandered aimlessly through the underbrush. Was Tyler ever going to forgive him? Would they ever bridge this immense chasm? He shook his head as if to physically dispel the thoughts, but they clung to him like the dampness of the moss beneath his feet. As he stumbled onwards, lost, the colossal trees morphed. They transformed from something familiar to intimidating sentinels of his failure, a grim reminder of the man he had seen in the mirror. He stopped at a colossal oak and knelt, pushing aside the roots, when a flash of something caught his eye, a long-forgotten family journal. With trembling fingers, he pried it free. The calloused pages spoke of family inequities, buried treasure, and unresolved betrayals, leading to sorrowful echoes of decisions that rippled through generations. The fury surged back, mingling with sorrow, each revelation heavier than the last. But the tension boiled anew in George's chest as he thought of his own father, looming dread returning. The news loomed over him. The funeral that awaited him back in town, unannounced, filled with the faces he'd spent his life avoiding. If only he hadn't been such a coward, so stuck in his own sorrow. Would Tyler stand by him? Would he choose to reconnect or retreat into the shadows like his father had done? And as he desperately searched for a way out of the woods, the chilling uncertainty grew tighter around him. George's heart raced as he clutched the journal, its weight a tether to the past. Each page felt like a map to buried treasure, filled with the gold of memories and the rust of long-held grievances. He studied the handwritten notes, his father's meticulous script carving a path of familial disappointments and unheeded warnings across the brittle pages. Could he finally confront the emotional inheritance that had haunted him? Rising to his feet, George's thoughts shifted from nostalgia to necessity. In a way, the woods had always been his sanctuary, but now they felt like a labyrinth designed to keep him trapped amid his unresolved conflicts. Should he return to the funeral and confront his father's legacy, or seek out Tyler to repair their shattered relationship? Decisions swirled within him like autumn leaves caught in a whirlwind, but the call for resolution was undeniable. As he moved deeper through the forest, he recognized that the journey was no longer about chasing shadows. It was about clarity, an understanding that perhaps he had wielded his ranger duties as a shield against confronting his true self. He had buried himself in trees, trails, and maps while neglecting the broken compass of his heart. This was the moment to stop wandering blindly. He recalled Tyler's voice, laced with disappointment during their last argument, echoing endlessly in his mind. What if the unspoken words hung in the air like the fog around him? "Dad, you're too obsessed with your job." The words jolted him. Tyler was right. George had let his role define him instead of being a father first. The forest closed in around him, reclaiming him as he wrestled with his emotions. He could remain the victim of circumstance, or he could seize this moment and carve a new path. George could steer his legacy, could shape it instead of letting the shadows dictate his journey. His steps quickened with purpose. The journal's revelations had ignited a spark. Perhaps a confrontation with Tyler was not just about repair, but about evolution, as individuals and as a father and son. The realization rolled over him. Justification wouldn't mend their bond, compassion would. But how could he teach compassion when he felt so unfamiliar with it himself? When the scrim of trees began to thin, a wave of uncertainty washed over him. What if Tyler chose to stay distant? What if the fissure grew even wider? No more would he allow chance to dictate his fate. He had to plan this. He needed to articulate the words that had remained stranded in his heart all these years. Suddenly, a rustling nearby disrupted his thoughts. He froze, senses heightened in anticipation. Was it an animal, or had Tyler returned? "Dad?" The sound was tentative yet hopeful. For a fleeting moment, George's heart surged. Could this be a new beginning? He took a deep breath and stepped forward, ready to face the reckoning of unaddressed issues and wounded pride. As he emerged from the thicket, the scene laid out before him was charged with tension. Tyler stood not far off, eyes wary but determined, much like his father. The moment hung in the balance, ripe for confrontation, yet laced with possibility. In another moment, the air would crack with the intensity of unspoken truths, and both would discover whether healing was possible or if they were too far gone. "Let's talk," George finally said, steeling himself for whatever response would come next. But as the words left his lips, an unsettling thought dawned upon him. Had he truly learned to communicate, or would he fail once again? The truth of their relationship stood before them, naked and unadorned, ready to dictate the terms of their bond. And as George stared into his son's guarded gaze, he wondered what the next chapter of their lives would unveil. The tension crackled in the air as George stood face to face with Tyler, both men grappling with their emotions. George's heart thumped heavily, each beat echoing the fears that had paralyzed him for so long. Tyler's expression was an unreadable mask, a mixture of hope and apprehension. "Dad," Tyler said quietly, the word lingering between them. "I didn't think you'd come back." George swallowed hard, his throat constricting with an amalgamation of regret and longing. This was the moment he'd been dreading, yet yearning for. "I didn't know if I could," he admitted, a deep vulnerability unfurling within him. He could almost hear the rustle of leaves whispering promises of a new beginning. But first, they needed to face the storm that loomed over them. "What do you want to say?" Tyler's voice was steady, but strained. There was a resilience about him, an unwillingness to back down. "I want to apologize," George blurted out, surprising even himself. The words felt foreign, unwieldy, yet freeing. For too long I let my work be who I am, and I lost sight of what matters most, my family. Tyler's eyebrows knitted together, the skepticism evident. It's easy to say that now, but what about all the times you chose your job over us? There was bitterness there, sharp and raw, yet a flicker of understanding flickered behind his eyes as well. George felt the weight of his son's accusations settle on his shoulders like an unbearable burden. He had to confront that truth, the truth he had avoided in dark corners of his mind for years. "I can't change the past," he said, forcing out each word. "But I want to change the present. I'm still here. I want to be part of your life." The silence grew thick between them, both men grappling with the implications of this fragile exchange. George noted how Tyler's posture softened slightly, his body language hinting at the possibility of forgiveness, or at least a willingness to explore the path towards healing. "What makes you think this is enough?" Tyler challenged, crossing his arms defensively. "A couple of words? You think that's going to fix things?" "I know it won't," George replied earnestly. "But I'm willing to do the work. I'm here to listen, to learn. I realize now that I've been blind to what it means to truly be present, to be a father." Tyler's eyes searched George's face as if attempting to uncover some hidden truth. "You can't just expect me to believe that," he said finally, his voice trembling with emotion. "There are years of distance between us that can't just disappear." "Then let's bridge that distance together," George implored. "I'm ready, but I need you to meet me halfway." As those words hung in the air, George felt a surge of hope despite the lingering fear of rejection. It was a flicker, a tiny flame igniting in the vast darkness of their fractured past. Tyler remained silent for a long moment, uncertainty etching itself across his brow. It was clear that the road to redemption wouldn't be immediate nor straightforward. "I want to believe you, Dad," he finally admitted, the sincerity in his voice shaking George to the core. "But trust, it's hard to regain." "I understand," George replied. "But can we start by talking? Just talk." Tyler took a deep breath, his shoulders releasing some of the tension that had lingered for too long. "I think I'm willing to try," he conceded. That small concession sent a ripple of relief through George, tempered with the knowledge that this was merely the first step in a long, arduous journey. In that moment of cautious optimism, George felt the boundary of his past begin to shift. He wouldn't allow fear or resentment to define them any longer. It was time for open dialogue, for laying the bricks that could rebuild their relationship. But as Tyler began to share the specific grievances that had led to their estrangement, George's mind whirred with doubt. Would he be able to hear and understand when the truths became painful? The path ahead could just as easily lead to deepened wounds instead of healing. Determined not to back down, he steeled himself for the conversation. This was the turning point, the moment he had both longed for and dreaded. The past was a loaded gun, but perhaps together they could learn to navigate the minefield of their emotions and begin anew. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting their shadows long and intertwined, George and Tyler stood on the precipice of change, ready to delve deeper into the heart of their fraught relationship. The real test loomed on the horizon, and George wondered, what other truths were buried in the silence between them? The air thickened as Tyler began the difficult process of unearthing years of buried pain. George felt the tremors of uncertainty ripple through his core, but he fought the urge to retreat. Instead, he focused on his son's voice, each word a stone thrown into the depths of their chasm, unsettling the murky waters between them. "Do you even realize how alone I felt when you weren't there?" Tyler's eyes glimmered with pent-up sorrow and frustration. George could see the young man he had once known, a vibrant boy, now marred by the shadows of abandonment. Each complaint Tyler laid bare was a thread unraveling the fabric of George's self-esteem. "I grew resentful," Tyler continued, punctuating each point with emotional intensity. While you were busy chasing deals and accolades, I was left to handle life without a father. You had no idea what it was like, did you?" The accusation cut deep. George clenched his fists, feeling the burn of shame spreading through him. What had he been doing all those years? The car rides alone, the missed birthdays, it all rushed back like a flood. He felt the conviction of Tyler's words stirring something within him, a determination to face these harsh realities. "No, I didn't," George finally confessed, his voice quaking at the enormity of truth. "I made choices that centered on success over family, decisions I thought were best at the time. I thought providing for you would be enough." Tyler shook his head, anguish etching new lines on his face. "You think that you could buy my love with money? I needed you, your presence, your guidance, and I got none of it." Each of Tyler's revelations sliced through George's defenses, but in that moment, George realized he was at a crossroads. He could either succumb to defensive anger or embrace the discomfort of accountability. He chose the latter. "I know I can't change the past," he said, honing his voice with newfound clarity, "but I can promise to change my actions moving forward." The room fell silent. Time seemed to stretch as both father and son processed what had just been said. George felt the flicker of hope from earlier igniting again, but this time flickering with a different intensity, one he had to nurture to keep alive. Tyler's expression softened, yet shadows of distrust remained. "You say that now," he replied, a hint of vulnerability creeping into his tone. "But can you actually show up? I need to see you make the effort, not just hear words that could mean anything." "I will," George responded, the weight of commitment settling heavily on his shoulders. He knew that this would not be easy, and for the first time he faced the possibility of failure. Would he falter, retreating to old habits of work over family? The thought was terrifying. "I'll find a way to make it real. Meet you after school, attend your games, whatever it takes." Tyler regarded him, skepticism mingling with curiosity. "It's going to take time," he reminded him pointedly. "If you aren't serious, you'll lose me again, and I can't go through that a second time." "Trust me, Tyler," George said, infused with a determination he hadn't felt in years. "I understand that the road ahead will be bumpy, but I have to earn back your trust, piece by piece. I'm ready to put in the work." And as they contemplated what lay ahead, the sense of impending change felt like a tangible force in the air. George's heart raced, not only with the fear of potential failures, but also with the thrill of possibilities. He imagined evenings filled with laughter instead of regret, moments woven with connection instead of distance. Before the conversation could shift into lighter territory, a piercing thought struck George. There was something else waiting in the shadows. The way Tyler spoke about his own experiences didn't merely reflect feelings of abandonment. There were signs that indicated deeper problems. What other wounds lay hidden just beneath the surface, waiting for George to confront? "What else have you been keeping from me?" George inserted cautiously, piercing through the veil of their exchange. Tyler froze, his expression now unreadable. The conversation that lay ahead would require courage, and George could feel it in his bones. This was just the beginning. The silence in the room felt like a thundercloud poised to burst. George's mind raced with trepidation, every scenario flashing before his eyes, each more terrifying than the last. He had taken the first step toward bridging the chasm. Now, what could Tyler reveal that would deepen their already fraught relationship even further? The fear of vulnerability quaked in the air between them. After a long moment, Tyler finally exhaled, as though dislodging something heavy. "I didn't just feel abandoned, Dad. Things got dark for me. There were moments when I thought I wouldn't make it through." His gaze dropped to the floor, and George's heart twisted. The last thing he had wanted was for his son to unveil the depths of his pain as if it were a wound still festering. "What do you mean?" George pressed, urgency anchoring his tone. Each word felt like a hand reaching out, desperate to connect. Tyler shifted uncomfortably, pulling a hand through his hair. I struggled in school. I started hanging out with the wrong crowd, people who didn't care about me, he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. I thought I was getting acceptance, that someone actually wanted me around. I was foolish. The revelation rocked George to his core. 1,000 regretful thoughts assaulted him. He could have intervened, could have noticed, could have acted. Did you ever get into trouble? Were you hurt? Tyler looked up, his eyes suddenly fierce. I made bad choices, Dad. I got caught up in drugs, and it almost destroyed me. I was lost. The weight of these words pressed down on George like a physical entity. How could he have been so blind? Rage roiled through him, not at Tyler, but at himself. Here he had been, so self-absorbed in his pursuit of success that he hadn't even seen his son unraveling. I'm so sorry, George murmured, as if that could somehow bridge the immense gap between them. Tyler remained stoic, but George could see the tension in the lines of his face. Sorry doesn't change what happened, Ty announced, his tone still steady, but nonetheless filled with an underlying tremor of hurt. You have to know that. This is about showing up now, not just last-minute apologies. George felt the truth of his son's words illuminate the path ahead, stark and unforgiving. He recognized that saying he'd be there wasn't enough. He would have to prove it with measurable actions, more than just kind intentions. He envisioned all the years he had squandered, the years Tyler could never get back. I get that, George said, a new resolve crystallizing in his gut. I want to be there for you, Tyler. Tell me what you need. I'll do it. I need more than conversations, Dad, Tyler replied, his voice gaining strength. I need accountability. I don't want to just hear you say things. I want to see you involve yourself in my life. I need you to understand what's really at stake. Start showing up. Commit to it. George nodded, absorbing the gravity of his son's demand. You deserve that. You deserve more. And I will find a way to make it happen, he affirmed. The words now loaded with the promise of tangible effort rather than empty promises. Yet beneath the layers of understanding, new doubts churned. Could he genuinely change? Could he resurrect the connection they both longed for? As Tyler began to open up further, George noticed something else lurking in his son's expression, something unspoken yet vivid. George felt a ripple of apprehension. Tyler, is there more you want to tell me? I can sense there's something deeper you're holding back. Tyler's gaze flickered, a storm of emotions flashing quickly across his face, fear, anger, and what appeared to be desperation. Not now, he said finally, but the hesitation echoed between them like an uninvited guest. Though the discussion about their past had unearthed a trove of shared pain and misunderstanding, the lingering threads of unknown truths festered both hope and anxiety in George's gut. What other demons haunted Tyler? As their conversation wound toward a close, George knew one fundamental truth. This process had only just begun. He would need to brace himself for the journey ahead, one defined by both discovery and vulnerability. With their connection re-established, the next challenge loomed ahead, fraught with uncertainty. Tyler would need to feel safe sharing everything with his father, and George dared to wonder what lost foundation could truly be unearthed with each revelation. The next conversation awaited them with a palpable tension, urging George to find the courage to face whatever lay beneath the surface of Tyler's guarded heart. How would he keep pushing for honesty while facing the risk of more pain? And as that question flickered in his mind, George began to ready himself for the unveiling of the truth that approached. George stood in the dim light of the living room long after the conversation with Tyler had ended, the air still thick with the emotional residue of their exchange. He moved absent-mindedly, his thoughts churning like a turbulent sea. What had he done today to create a real path forward? Had he done enough? As night cloaked the house in shadows, George felt a familiar gnawing ache within himself. The years he had put his work above his family now felt like an enormous weight pressing down on him, a stark reminder of his failures. Pushing it aside wouldn't suffice. He needed to confront it. The next morning, he set out to map out tangible steps to reconnect with Tyler. The idea of attending a support group for families affected by addiction had lingered in the back of his mind since Tyler's revelation. Accepting that Tyler's past had implications not only for him, but for George too, was daunting. It was a concept he grappled with fiercely, a blending of his world with the painful reality of his son's experiences. Sitting at the kitchen table with a blank piece of paper before him, he wrote down actionable goals. Attend weekly family support meetings, schedule one-on-one talks with Tyler, participate in his activities. The list felt inadequate compared to the emotional chasm he needed to bridge. Yet there was a comfort in finally taking an active role. It seemed like a beginning. With a purpose now driving him, George picked up the phone and called a local community center that hosted support groups. Their next meeting would be in a couple of days. He felt his heart race, a mixture of anxiety and hope flooding through him. This was a painful but necessary step toward change, both for himself and for Tyler. Afterward, he sought out Tyler's interests. George recalled Tyler's artistic talent, one he had always admired but had taken for granted. Hunting through some old boxes, he unearthed a dusty sketchbook filled with his son's drawings from years ago. Those illustrations were glimpses into a world Tyler had created, yet another space George had neglected to explore. He decided to bring the sketchbook to their next conversation. Maybe it would spark something in Tyler, a sense of pride, perhaps, or the motivational push to reconnect with a passion he had abandoned. George's heart ached for recognition, for moments of laughter and joy to replace the surrounding shadows of despair. As the appointed day for the support group approached, George felt a rising dread. What if his efforts were in vain? He had done so much wrong in the past. Would Tyler even want to engage with him after all these years? Surrendering to these thoughts, he confronted the truth head-on. He wasn't simply fighting for Tyler's trust, but for his own redemption too. The tension was palpable as he walked into the support group room. It was a small gathering, faces filled with whispers of shared pain and recovery. George observed as parents shared their stories, struggling with vulnerability, yet standing firm in their desire to change. Would he find wisdom here? The fear of losing Tyler had ignited a fire within him, a need to be more than a source of disappointment. Later that evening, Tyler returned home, eyes weary, the shadows of his day etched deeply in his face. It struck George then that their emotional labyrinths were intertwined. As his son sat on the edge of the couch, George felt the enormity of his mission intensify. "Hey, I found something," he said, gesturing to the sketchbook resting on the table, the pages waiting to tell stories long forgotten. Tyler's eyes flickered with interest, but quickly hardened. "What is it?" "What you used to create." "Your art," George replied, determined. He understood now. He had to take the leap. This wasn't just about displaying the past, it was about healing their relationship. But as Tyler reached for the sketchbook, a sudden wave of uncertainty settled over George. Would this gesture bring them closer, or would it unveil even deeper wounds? The question loomed large over them, thickening the air once more, and as Tyler flipped through the pages, a deeper silence settled, fraught with the tension of revelations waiting to unfold. The stillness in the room stretched uncomfortable between them as Tyler inspected the faded sketches. George held his breath, feeling the weight of one missed opportunity spiral into another. Each stroke of Tyler's pencil on the pages seemed to echo their past, times they shared together that had faded under the shadows of neglect. "Do you remember this?" Tyler's voice was low, almost distant, as he pointed to a vibrant landscape. It was a scene from a family trip they had taken years ago, a moment lost in the hustle of life's chaos. There was hesitation in Tyler's eyes, a fragile flicker of something that George couldn't quite place. Nostalgia, perhaps, but also hurt. George's heart pounded. He needed to respond, to connect. "I remember," he said, his voice steady. "You were so proud of that one. It's amazing, Tyler. You have a gift." The silence lingered again, and it weighed heavy on George's shoulders as he spoke. "I've been thinking a lot about how I've been an absent father. I want to change that. I want to be part of your life if you'll let me." Tyler's grip tightened around the sketchbook, the knuckles turning white. "You think it's that simple? Just showing up and pretending everything is fine?" Anger flooded through his voice, chasing away the subtle tenderness they had just glimpsed. "It isn't simple. I know that," George responded, his chest tightening. "I'm not trying to dismiss what you've been through. I want to find a way to start over. Together." Despite his honesty, Tyler rolled his eyes, his skepticism palpable. "You talk a lot about wanting to change, but how do I know this isn't just another moment? You've let me down before." George felt his stomach twist at the accusation, biting back the defensiveness that bubbled up. "You're right. I've made mistakes. But this time, I'm committed to doing the work to fix it. That's why I went to the support group. I'm learning that it's about more than just us, Tyler. It's also about understanding myself." At that moment, he saw a flicker of contemplation cross Tyler's face. It was fleeting, but significant. "Like what?" Tyler asked, the edge in his tone softening just a bit. "I realized that I used my work as an escape," George admitted, feeling the vulnerability lay bare before his son. "I thought I was providing for you, but I see now it cost me our relationship, time I can't get back. I don't want to make excuses anymore." George took a deep breath, the air thick with the gravity of his confession. "I wish I could show you what I've learned." He began to share memories of the support group, of the lessons about accountability and the importance of honesty. Tyler listened, a tight knot of emotions twisting in his expression. For the first time, George saw a tiny crack in the wall his son had built around himself. This was an opening, a positive sign maybe, but George knew one conversation wouldn't be enough to rebuild trust. As the evening wore on, they discussed art, the sketches sparking memories of shared moments, some joyful, some bitter. Each exchange felt like a brick being laid down, but George was painfully aware of how fragile their new foundation might be. When the conversation shifted back to the art, Tyler turned to the last page of the sketchbook. He hesitated before closing it, an unsettling silence consuming the space again. "I want to try again, but you know it's not just up to me." "That's fair," George replied, the weightiness of Tyler's words hanging in the air. "I can't rush this. I'm not asking for trust overnight. I understand it's a process." But Tyler's expression shifted, like storm clouds gathering. "You don't get it, do you? What if I can't let you back in?" That question struck like a lightning bolt, cutting through the tentative hope that had begun to grow between them. George swallowed, suddenly aware that this was the very crux of their conflict. "Then we'll work through it," he said, steadying his resolve. "But we can't do it alone. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere this time." With his heart pounding, George felt a profound uncertainty settle around him. Had he merely postponed the inevitable? What awaited them on the other side of this tentative foundation they were trying to lay? As Tyler stared down at the sketchbook, lost in contemplation, George's mind raced ahead, questioning whether he truly had the strength to confront whatever truth lay in the unfolding shadows of their relationship. In that quiet moment, George realized the next step may hold more than just a fragmented past. It could force him to confront demons of his own. The moment hung precariously in the air as Tyler finally lifted his gaze. "So what's next, Dad?" And as the words escaped his son's lips, George felt the weight of their journey intensify, as if a new path had opened, yet fraught with the potential for both healing and pain. Would he be brave enough to take the next step into the unknown? George took a moment to absorb Tyler's question, the gravity of it settling like heavy stones in his stomach. "What's next?" he echoed, feeling the ripples of that simple inquiry pulsate through his mind. It was a call to action, a challenge that held the potential for both growth and failure. He realized that they were at a crossroads, not just in their relationship, but within himself. It was time to shift from words to action, to demonstrate the commitment he had professed. "I need to show you that I'm willing to put in the work, Tyler. That means spending more time together, doing things you enjoy, and really listening. No distractions." Tyler seemed to absorb this, his guarded expression suggesting he was weighing the sincerity of his father's intentions. George felt a strange mix of optimism and fear. He had been ready to leap into the reconciliation process, but now he felt his buoyancy weighed down by the reality of his past. "What if I say yes?" Tyler asked cautiously, breaking the silence that wrapped around them like an opaque curtain. "What if we start doing things together? What if it still doesn't feel right?" "Then we'll confront that too," George replied, summoning a confidence he wasn't entirely sure he possessed. "Let's take it one day at a time. I just want a chance to try, to prove that we can rebuild this." There was a long pause before Tyler nodded slowly, the weight of their history hanging between them. "Okay, let's start small. Maybe I can show you some of my sketches and you can talk about your work a little." An unexpected wave of relief swept over George. This wasn't a grand gesture, but a small, essential step forward. "I'd like that. I'd really like that," he said quietly. Yet as Tyler began to gather his sketches again, George felt another weight settle on his shoulders, a creeping sense of inadequacy. He had no formal artistic training. His understanding of art came primarily from his visits to galleries and museums, always in pursuit of something to fill his time while neglecting deeper familial needs. What if he couldn't help Tyler as much as he wanted? Would his presence feel more like a burden than a support? Shaking off the doubt, he reminded himself that the journey was more about showing up than being perfect. They could discover this passion together, flaws and all. As the sketches spread across the table, bright colors contrasting starkly against the muted background, a flame of determination ignited within George. This was it. His moment to embrace vulnerability, not just in connecting with his son, but in acknowledging his limitations and the desire to learn together. "Tyler, I know I haven't been there for you," he began, but Tyler cut him off. "I don't want to hear about the past anymore tonight, okay? Let's focus on what we can do now." George felt his chest tighten again, but there was something liberating in Tyler's directness. He no longer had to navigate the complexities of a world he had forged alone, a world that had now dissolved under the weight of regret. Here was a path illuminated by the possibility of connection. As Tyler launched into an enthusiastic explanation of his work, George marveled at the eagerness in his son's voice, the way his hands animatedly gestured to describe each sketch. Tyler's passion became a vibrant thread weaving them together, pulling George closer into a space he had long feared to occupy. Yet amid the warmth of the moment, another thought nagged at George. Was this fragile connection a mere illusion, teetering on the brink of collapse? Could Tyler's willingness to engage shift as quickly as the color of his sketches? "Let's plan for next week, too," Tyler suggested, interrupting George's spiraling thoughts. "We can grab some art supplies and make a day of it." "Absolutely," George replied, excitement bubbling up. They could build on this. It wouldn't come easy, but this was the start they both needed. However, as George left that night, he realized that beneath the excitement lay a persistent ache. Could he summon enough resilience to face potential setbacks? And more troubling, could he shake the doubt that his newfound determination would wither as quickly as it had bloomed? In those moments of uncertain clarity, he realized he had a choice. He could continue down this uncertain path of personal growth, but it would require confronting the darker corners of his motivations and fears. "Next week will be the true test, won't it?" he whispered to himself as he stepped into the cool night air. Little did he know, the challenges they would face were just beginning. A confrontation with his own demons awaited, one that could prove as revealing as their budding relationship. As George drove home, a question lingered in his mind, clouded with both anticipation and dread. What deeper truths about himself and his past would emerge in the light of this renewed commitment to his son? As the days rolled by, George found himself oscillating between determination and trepidation. He woke each morning with a plan, a list of sketches and ideas he wanted to discuss with Tyler. Yet, every evening, he drowned under an avalanche of doubt. What if he failed? What if, in showing support, he inadvertently exposed his ignorance and indifference, making Tyler retreat instead of drawing closer? The day before their first planned art session hung heavy in the air, anticipation twisting within him like a knotted rope. He drove to the local art supply store, the storefront glinting under the afternoon sun, an unassuming gateway into a world he hoped to understand better. As he stepped inside, he was engulfed by a cacophony of colors, textures, and scents, the familiar smell of paint mingled with the faint musk of paper and ink. Navigating through aisles filled with supplies, he scrutinized every option with an unsettling mix of longing and inadequacy. How could he choose the right materials without even knowing what Tyler preferred? The vibrant acrylics beckoned, but so did the delicate charcoal, like whispers from artists who knew beauty but lacked his reservations. "I'll take 4 of these," he said abruptly, pointing at an array of paint tubes, the red of his cheeks matching the splashes on the labels. His insecurities gnawed at him as he walked out, trembling slightly under the weight of a shopping bag that now felt symbolic of an ongoing commitment. When George arrived the next day, excitement flickered nervously within him. Tyler greeted him at the door, his welcoming smile a stark contrast to his father's tight-lipped expression. Perhaps sensing his father's awkwardness, Tyler initiated the conversation about colors, their meanings, and the sensations they evoked. "Art is about the feeling, Dad," Tyler said. "Not just the technique. It's how you express what's inside you." As they set up their workspace, brushes and color palettes sprawled across the table, George couldn't shake the feeling that his son was relying on him to bring a connection to life. He tried to inject enthusiasm into his words, but stumbled over his thoughts. His lack of artistic vocabulary heightened his self-consciousness. Tyler didn't seem to notice, lost in explaining the inspiration behind a new piece he was sketching. "Can you explain more about this one?" George asked, battling a wave of self-doubt that flared in response to Tyler's focused expression. "What were you thinking?" "It's about loneliness," Tyler responded, a hint of vulnerability creeping in. "How you can feel alone even in a crowded place." George felt as if the air had been sucked from the room. It stung to hear his son articulate a feeling they both had navigated separately for years, both trapped in their own forms of solitude. "I understand," George replied softly, the surfacing emotion threading an unspoken bond between them. For the next couple of hours, with paintbrushes in hand and new colors bursting on the canvas, conversation flowed between them, albeit slowly. George painted a scene of a forest, vibrant yet tainted with hues of blue, perhaps a reflection of his own emotions. "Why that choice?" Tyler asked, an eyebrow raised. "It feels layered, like life," George admitted, momentarily surprised by his own honesty. "I wanted to show beauty, but the blue adds depth. It reminds me of the things we go through that may seem dark." Tyler studied the canvas intently, his expression inscrutable. Something shifted within George, a growing awareness that perhaps this was the vulnerability Tyler had been seeking all along, the admission that he didn't have all the answers, that growth came from grappling with discomfort. Just then, Tyler chuckled, the sound pulling George from his reverie. "You might have a hidden talent after all, Dad," he teased, before continuing on to his own work. In that moment, George felt a flicker of hope. It was a modest victory, yet a small triumph nonetheless. However, it was short-lived as the haunting question resurfaced. Was this a true turnaround, or just a fleeting glimpse into a deeper connection that could ultimately crumble? That evening, as George cleaned up their makeshift studio, a thought gripped him. What if they truly began to confront their loneliness? Each of them standing at the edge of a vast canvas, yearning to fill it, yet daunted by fear and history. And with an unexpected force, a question formed in his mind as the shadows of the evening deepened. Were they ready to delve deeper into not just each other's art, but the layers of their own hearts? The fear of the unknown loomed larger, challenging George to face the emotional risks of true reconciliation. Little did he know, the following weeks would test those bonds fiercely, revealing more than either had anticipated about their connection, and perhaps even themselves. George embraced the vibrant morning sun, a sense of purpose radiating through him as he prepared for another art session with Tyler. The incrementally changing dynamic between them fueled his spirit. Each brushstroke shared was a testament to their potential for connection, yet beneath that newfound hope lay remnants of unaddressed pain, shadows that needed to be illuminated and examined. As Tyler entered the living room, sketchbook in hand, he wore an expression of eager anticipation. George couldn't help but smile. This simple act of sharing made all the difference. "Ready to dive in?" he asked, hoping to capture a glimpse of the boy he had once known. "I've got something special for us today," Tyler replied, his voice tinged with excitement. "I want to create a mural in the garage, something that tells our story but in colors we haven't used before. What do you think?" George's heart soared. "That sounds incredible. Let's do it. Let's create something together." There was a palpable energy in the air, one of collaboration and trust, but George remained vigilant, mindful of the hurdles that still lay ahead. Soon, they found themselves elbow-deep in paint, colors splashing against the blank canvas of the garage wall. As they worked side by side, George marveled at Tyler's artistic talent, the way he maneuvered the brush, his creativity spilling onto the wall like a river finding its course. It reminded George of the boy he had watched grow, the young artist who had yearned for expression but had been silenced by neglect. "Look, that's you," Tyler said, pointing to a section of the mural he had begun to outline. "This part represents the forest, the time we lost and the memories we need to reclaim." George's chest tightened, recognizing the powerful symbolism in Tyler's vision. "And this part," he gestured to the contrasting colors forming on the other side of the canvas, "can represent the chaos and struggle, everything we've faced together, but also the journey toward healing." As they painted, every stroke reflected memories long buried beneath the weight of grief and regret. They discussed their feelings, the conversations laden with honesty, each layer they added to the mural echoing the emotional layers they sought to peel back within themselves. This wasn't just art, it was catharsis. Hours passed without either of them noticing. With laughter interspersing their dialogue, George began to sense a shift, not merely in the direction of their relationship, but the transformation within himself. He was no longer the father who stood distant, guarded, and consumed by his role. He was an active participant in Tyler's life, a co-creator of their shared narrative. As they stepped back to admire their work, George felt a wave of pride wash over him. The mural, colorful and chaotic, told their story boldly. The past remained, intertwining with the present, a canvas of both pain and resilience. "I can't believe we did this," Tyler said, beaming. "You did most of the heavy lifting," George countered, feeling warmth bloom in his chest at Tyler's achievement. "It's beautiful, just like you." But after the initial glow of accomplishment faded, George felt a tug of fear again. What would happen when the colors dried? Would their efforts hold, or would hidden resentment splinter their progress? "Tyler," he ventured cautiously, "now that we've shared this, can we talk about what comes next? About what we might be avoiding?" Tyler stiffened, an unconscious barrier rising between them, but George pressed on. "I want to understand the challenges you mentioned. I don't want to just celebrate the good times. I want to help with the hard stuff too. You deserve that." There was a flicker of uncertainty behind Tyler's eyes, a reluctance to delve back into that darkness. "I'm not sure if I'm ready to go there fully," he admitted. "What if it all unravels? What if it just brings everything back?" "We take it at your pace," George replied steadily. "But think of the mural. We created it by layering different experiences. What if we treat our emotions the same way? One layer at a time?" Tyler's demeanor softened, the weight of vulnerability visible in the lines of his face. Okay, he said tentatively. Let's try. I won't promise it'll be easy. Neither will I, George reassured him sincerely. But we navigate it together now. We're a team. With a hesitant nod, Tyler slowly began to recount stories from his past. Moments of loneliness that stung harsher than he had let on. The pressures of fitting in, the times he had sought validation in the wrong places. George listened intently, fully present, absorbing each revelation as it landed between them like stones creating a bridge. As the murmurings of their unvoiced pain filled the garage, George experienced a profound shift. Every memory shared reinforced his resolve to support his son, to be the father he should have been. The fears of past neglect receded as a stronger bond took form. Just as the conversation deepened further, the doorbell rang, echoing through their intimate space. Both paused, a moment of uncertainty looming as they exchanged glances. "It's my friends," Tyler said, looking uncertain. "They want to see the mural." "Let's show them," George offered, feeling a rush of excitement. "Let them celebrate what we've built, you've built." As they swung the door open, George couldn't help but feel dawn breaking within him. He was emerging from the shadows, standing in his son's world, ready to embrace the chaos and creativity of life. It was the beginning of a new chapter. But as Tyler introduced George to his friends, a sense of fulfillment washed over him. The journey ahead would still be layered with challenges, but their voices would intertwine, each conversation weaved into the fabric of growth. As they celebrated, George remembered the urgency of making all these moments count. The journey needed active participation and commitment. This was just the start of embracing the shadows and finding the light together. Their mural, an emotional testament of trust and transformation, was just the beginning, and George was ready to invest everything in the bond he longed to solidify. Now was the time for all the supporters of transformative journeys to take action. You need to subscribe now to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show that you care. Comment your reactions and theories about this transformative journey. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your support makes all the difference in amplifying personal overcoming stories.